Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are located. We are launching our first podcast. Trade in Motion, it's thrilled to announce that we have a new initiative, a podcast about people. People first, the heart of business. And we are so excited that our first guest is Joanna Douglas from the United States. Because you know what? We will be interviewing our guests in all North America, Mexico, the United States, and Canada. This time, the United States is the winner. We have Joanna Douglas from Texas, our first guest, and we are very happy to welcome her, and I will leave her to introduce herself. Thank you, Joanna, for being here.
Oh, Gabriela, I'm just absolutely thrilled. And to be the first guest, way to go, Texas. Let's give a round of applause for that. As Gabriela mentioned, I am Joanna Douglas. I am the founder and chief empowerment officer of Insight. We are an Enneagram and leadership coaching consultancy. And I'm thrilled to be here and talk about people first. I love talking about people. It's what I do every day.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joanna. So we would like to talk in this podcast about people because people is the most important asset worldwide. So Joanna, you built a reputation for putting people first. Can you share what that philosophy means to you and how does it influence your approach to leadership and talent development?
Yeah, absolutely. People first to me is remembering in the workplace that we're humans. All of us have a heart. All of us have blood. Well, most of us have hearts and blood, and we have two eyes and five senses, and we're really not all that different. And I work with primarily female leaders who really want to understand themselves better to help their workplace be pleasant, right? And to still have impact, to be able to lead with personal authority. And I think people first, from my point of view, is remembering that it's just work, right? We are people first before we are workers, and to recognize the humanity in others first in reconnecting with that authentic voice. I talk a lot with my leaders about remembering their authentic voice, and then coming to work as a human, not leading in their authentic style. We talk a lot about that with leaders, not trying to lead like a mentor had led or a movie character or a political figure, but to be authentically themselves and allowing that to be okay. That's how people first guides what I do every day.
Oh, great, great approach, Joanna. And how do you do that? Because for me, the first thing about people is work on themselves, work on thyself, on strengthen ourselves. Because how can you be a leader if you are not strong enough to lead a team? Because every person has different stories, they have different pasts, and you have your past and your stories too. So how do you do for a leader to lead and help people to do the best and to bring the best of them?
Yeah, it's a complex it's a complex workplace, isn't it? And we not everyone is, from my point of view, having what I call an awake lifetime. Some people are just sort of, they take a breath and then they live until they don't take another breath, and then they just sort of exist. I think the leaders that end up on my screen or in one of my workshops or in one of my courses is having an awake lifetime. Like they are interested in learning, they're lifelong learners. And I think that point of working on themselves is a very good one because that really allows you to approach your work with a lot of empathy, because if you have worked on your stories and that could be in coaching with or courses or books. One of the things I talk a lot about in with my leaders and in my talk in my YouTube talks and blog is curiosity. You know, that being curious and empathetic over being dogmatic and a know-it-all versus a learn-it-all is what I talk a lot about with those leaders. So I think that curiosity allows us to be more empathetic, allows us to be more human, and allows us to sort of come to the workplace with a level of understanding that we all have a past. We all have a past that has shaped who we are today, and whether we've worked on that or not, because not everybody wants to. It's I think the humility as a human to go, okay, we're not in the same place, but that doesn't developmentally, but that doesn't mean I need to judge them. I need to have some empathy for where they are. And I need to have some curiosity about where we're going and how we get there together.
Yeah. And there is also this aspect of vulnerability, which is very important. So, how do you see leadership versus vulnerability? What role does vulnerability play in leadership today? And how do you encourage leaders to embrace vulnerability without sacrificing their authority or confidence?
Yeah, that's a hard one. Fair warning, I am a Brene Brown junkie, not as much as one of my coaching friends who has one of Brene Brown's sayings tattooed on her arm. So if you're in her human resources office, you get to see clear as kind all the time when you're in her office. But so Brene Brown talks a lot about, and others do as well. But Brene came to market talking about vulnerability. And she continues in her podcasts and in her writings, continues to talk about it being an important aspect of leadership. And again, your whole concept of being people first. And I think there's a level of discernment that needs to happen with that vulnerability. I think you can be vulnerable and wise in the workplace. So I think you can talk about your feelings or, hey guys, I'm having a rough day. The baby was awake all night and I'm not able to really think clearly. So you might all want to try to figure it out yourself before you come in because I might be a little reactive. Now that's vulnerable, but you don't need to say, here's what happened to me as a child when this thing that I haven't healed yet. You don't need to. I think you can be yourself and not reveal all of your psyche wounds. But that takes a level of maturity. And like when George Floyd was murdered and we had this summer of awakening that where people were, during the pandemic where we were bringing our whole self to work, I learned things about people that I wish I could unknow. There were some people that really took this bring your whole self to work and probably shared too much, right? And maybe we're too vulnerable. I don't know. But I think yes, you can be vulnerable. Yes, you can be courageous. And I think you need to discern what is appropriate for the situation and where you are. And that is the work for an entire life, Gabriella. I think that yes, I encourage vulnerability. I also struggle with vulnerability. Like it is a very hard thing for me to be public as I'm emerging as a thought leader in women's leadership. I'm even discerning Did I share too much? Did I not share enough? Like it is I think a balance and a constant conversation. So if you ever see me not being vulnerable or being too vulnerable, we'll be accountability partners and you can call me out.
Thank you, Joanna.
Sure.
You too, you can do the same thing.
Okay, great.
So
Good.
so we go back to confidence. So
Mm.
we so vulnerability, do you think that comes with confidence, that you are so confident of yourself that you can accept your vulnerability and you can talk about that with your team? And as the example that you say, today it's a hard day, maybe I'm not in my best the best time of the year today. So do you think that that comes with confidence? And if yes, how do you train and how do you work that confidence?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's actually more courage than it is confidence. I think you can be very self-confident and not reveal anything about your true self. But I think they probably come in a set. I do have so the top three items that female leaders come to me and ask for support with is building their and these are buzzwords now in the I don't know across the world, but at least in the United States, these are three key things. They come to me for emotional intelligence because a lot of people think that that's a stepping stone. It is, but it's now ubiquitous. Not everybody knows the original five components of emotional intelligence. Executive presence is another one, and also not many people, it's also ubiquitous. People think it's, can I develop strategy? But it's really not about the actual business. It's about how you're perceived. So executive presence and confidence. And I think for men and women leaders, we there unless you've gone to business school or become a student of leadership, both of which I've done, um, I've always been fascinated with it. When my dad was alive, it's funny, I went through his library and it's almost all the same books because I think he instilled that into me. He was a military officer, was an interest of his. But I think that confidence is applicable to just being a person because you're not necessarily trained in how you're trained in the actual job. So let's say you're an engineer, right? Let's say you're an engineer or in the mining business and you know about where to, I don't know anything about the mining business. I was trying to make it relevant to what you're doing, but it's you're trained in that job. If you're an attorney, you're trained in the law and how to negotiate or be in a courtroom, but you aren't really taught to be a leader of attorneys or a leader of engineers. You're just sort of promoted because you did a really good job as an engineer in most cases. So I was a really good salesperson. So they promoted me to be a leader. And so I called my dad and I said, I'm managing people now. How do I not mess up? And he goes, well, that's number one is you have a high intention. And then he recommended a couple of books, and they are for first-time leaders. I have several that I always recommend because I was like, okay, this helped me to first do no harm, right? To not have people go home and talk about me at their dinner table about being the worst. I work for the worst boss ever. Like that was a very high intention for me. And so, yeah, I think confidence, yes, to be vulnerable. But I think at the end of the day, that's really, I think it does help that. And that's something people want to build. But I think it takes courage first.
Okay, sure. And courage is a very strong word,
Yes.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I think a lifelong journey of being courageous.
So let's talk about leadership for women.
Mhm.
You help so many women find their leadership voice. How do you see that work? evolving as we navigate a climate where diversity and inclusion have become such hot button topics? Is there
Right.
room to support both men and women while still championing authentic leadership?
Yeah, I think, it's I've launched this business about a year and a half ago and in a different climate. But I've been dreaming about this since I was a Girl Scout at 7, 8, 9 years old, doing service work, um, and have been continually surprised in my own leadership journey. And this is in the 90s and early 2000s, where I was the only woman in leadership in a room. So that was, there is still a need for it. I think the conversations are different than they might have been when my mother entered the workforce in the 70s. I think that was a different conversation, but it's still very new to have
Yeah.
women in boardrooms. It's still relatively new. It's not necessarily new to have coworkers, to have an engineer as a coworker, but it might be new to have a
Yeah.
female leader. And so I think the work is still to be done. And I'm really been thinking a lot because I have some uh, men coming to me, and I'm not anti-men. I'm married to a lovely one and have many friends who are men. So it is just more, there are more resources, I think, available just for being a man. I think there's more resources, more cultural pathways available than there might be for female leaders. And I think if we can do this work without excluding anyone, right? I have some men who are like, I would really like to take this course, can I? And so, well, I don't see any reason why not. It does. I think some of the women in the room might not speak as freely, but I think the need, as I mentioned earlier, there isn't a training program. Unless you're going to business school or unless you're doing it, there's not a lot of resources for first time leaders or as leaders evolve. There, you have to really seek them out. But now you have podcasts and things like that. But for a while, there weren't nearly as many. So I think it's a hot topic. But I think if we can create the content so that it is still focused on the challenges that are real. Um, but if a man wants to learn about the challenges that are facing women, who am I to say that they can't participate in that conversation?
Yeah, and I've seen this as you mentioned. I work in mining, in the mining industry, and we've seen this for years. The percentage of women on the boards is very low, and that's why many women in mining associations are helping to train women to go to those to arrive to be part of the boards. And what would you recommend to them, Joanna? What would you say? Let's say a woman comes and say, I want to be part of a board. What should I do? What would you recommend to her?
I Well, the first thing I would say, kudos. I think part of the reason why we don't have as many women on boards is I don't know that women have as many examples to look to and to say, this is the path I want to follow because I also want to be on a board. I think you need to start with whatever the requirements are. I have a friend of mine who is in the C-suite right now in the healthcare industry. And as she is preparing for retirement, which is, 10 years away potentially for her, she is already talking to actually recruiters about, hey, what would I need to be doing now to make myself uh, palatable? What would make me look like I could, or not look like, but what experience do I need in order to sit on a board? And what type of board could I sit on with this area of expertise? So she's in human resources. So the she is looking at organizations as um, a human resources professional and sitting on boards that way. She's also in healthcare, so she could sit on a pharma board or another healthcare board or something along those lines, or a university and their healthcare. So I think it's one, if you could look for, recommendation would be, if you could look for a model, someone, you could probably Google or use chat or some of the other LLMs to help you find some women who are on boards. Ask them what they did, and then think about what could you be, if that is your aspiration. You can't just show up and say, I want to be on your board, and you don't know anything about their business or don't offer. They're going to look at what you offer. And so I think understanding what those requirements are going to be down the line is going to be very important for you to actually prepare for.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not, sometimes we want to be on a board. We've never been there. We don't know what it is, and we want to do it tomorrow. So I think that it's a path, a preparation, and also a mindset.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's clear.
Joanna, I want to talk about Enneagram. This is very, very specific. It's the first time that I hear in the US. I heard in Mexico I was doing a little bit of Enneagram, but in the US, the first time that I see Enneagram and I see this uh, figure that you have in your website. Can you
Mm-hmm.
talk about that? How do you help people to grow using Enneagram?
Favorite topic. Enneagram. So Enneagram is actually a reference to the symbol itself. It's a circle with 9 points, and it has a triangle and a hexagram in the middle. But Ennea is Greek for nine, and gram is Greek for image. So it's actually, the name of it is the description of a circle with 9 points around the sides. And each of the points represents personality. So this is a personality typing tool. Your listeners may be more familiar with Myers-Briggs or DISC or Hogan or Clifton Strengths. So it is a descriptor of a personality. The way I have come to learn with the Enneagram is that understanding your type is a description of what motivates you versus what I understand of DISC. And I could be wrong. We use this in the workplace too. DISC, as I understand it, and some of these others describe your behaviors as a fixed set of, this is who you are. So if you're high D, you might be very direct and demonstrative, and so on and so forth. So the 9 Enneagram types talk about what your motivation is and what your motivation is of this personality. And the theory is that you develop your personality. Some people call it ego, that formed when you were very young to keep you safe and surviving. So these are well honed survival instincts, which are great when you're 3, 4, 5, 6, and trying to figure out who you are in the world and who are these people, and there might be danger around that corner, right? Those are instinctual things. But if you're leading 1,000-person organization and you're in a high stress situation and you keep yelling at everybody because you don't feel safe, or you feel some sort of way, you are using that, the you are motivated by protecting yourself from a personality that formed when you were a child. So in the Enneagram, the thing I love about it is that knowing your type is the starting point. It's not, oh, I'm a high D, high I, low S and C. So you're not just sort of describing what your behaviors say you do. The motivation about how you show up at work, at home, in all areas of your life is not static. You can use the symbol of the Enneagram to grow. But a lot of people that, like with other personality typing methodologies, I meet people and they say, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm Enneagram coach, consultant, and teacher. And they'll say, oh, I'm a 6 with a 7 wing, or I'm a 4 with a 5 wing. And we can get into the methodologies behind that. They'll mention a number. And they're just saying it like, okay, this is going to excuse the rest of my behavior, the rest of my life, because I'm a 4 with a 3 wing, or I'm just a 5. I don't have to change anything about myself. And the theory that I use with Enneagram is I usually tell people when we're trying to figure out what their type is, I go, the one that you don't want to be is probably it. Because you're going, oh, there it is on paper, all my misbehavings. Like people go, well, I'm not a masochist. And I'm like, aren't you? I'm not rude and power hungry. Aren't you? It's the one that you have the most resistance to. That's usually it, because your ego, your personality does not want to think that there's anything wrong with you. Everything is great. But that generally pokes to a blind spot that's getting in your way. And that's what I talk about with my leaders. I mean, I don't talk about everything Enneagram. The first thing we try to figure out with their type is identify where that motivating emotion shows up and causes them problems. So if your motivation is to stay safe, then you're probably not going to take healthy risks at work. You're probably not going to go for a promotion, and not even go for it. You're not even going to apply for it, because what if you get too exposed, right? So we work on that emotion and sometimes I recommend that people do personal growth work. They might need a therapist. They might need to do some breath work or start meditating. Like it's a holistic approach, I believe. So for me, the Enneagram is beyond helping someone figure out what their type is so they can have a litany of excuses about why they might not be getting promoted, or they can use it as an excuse. We use it as the starting point and a launching pad to use other points in the Enneagram for growth.
Yeah, and it's just the beginning. After the path is long, it's really long, but it's a good beginning. And as you said, what we don't like is exactly what we have to work on, and when we have. So
I call them cringe-worthy moments of truth. So I have a leader who was not happy when we did her type, and she sent me an email, and she goes, "Look, this is an example of my boss." Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, how could you have handled that differently now that you know this is your type? And I also do something called subtypes. And she was like, how dare you? I was like, I'm just coaching you. You're the one that was in the argument with your boss. You asked me for some feedback. I gave you some feedback by asking you a question, and then she was argumentative with me in addition to her manager, which is exactly what she needs to work on, right? She needs to, some leaders need to pull it up a notch, and some leaders need to bring it down, bring the intensity down a notch. Just sort of depends on what we're working on.
Yeah, it's to be honest with ourselves, which sometimes is like, as you said, no, this is not me. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it can be a tough thing for sure.
So let's wrap up, Joanna. What would you tell the the young people or people wanting to advance in their career, to get a good job, to find their path? Because sometimes you say the path is this one, but that's not the path. What would you tell them? Do they have to work on themselves? Do they have to take some training, a coach? What would you recommend to them to grow?
Yeah, yes, all of that. Yes, to all of that. And I'm going to go back to a word we talked about earlier is have some courage. I think I have a family member who is of a certain age and looking back at her career saying, why didn't I get farther? And she was asking it rhetorically, so I did not answer. Uh, and it's she never she never stuck her neck out. She's doing the same exact thing that she's been doing for 30 years, which sounds awful to me. And in retrospect, it sounds awful to her. Like, I think she has some regrets. So I think I think awareness. I have a course that I'm launching very soon called Awareness, because the more we can recognize and work on ourselves, the more empathy we can have for others, as we talked about in the very beginning. But I think yes, you have to have awareness and you have to have the courage to take action, because otherwise you're just aware and miserable potentially. If you choose not to advance, that's yours. But know that and make a conscious choice about it versus having it be a resentment for the rest of your life. So
Yeah,
have some
exactly.
courage.
Have some courage. Be honest with yourself.
Oh, I like that one. Yes. Yeah. Which can be
Joanna,
hard.
thank you very much for being our first guest. We are so happy talking about people because, as I said, what is the most important asset worldwide? People. I mean, let's talk about us. Let's talk about the good things of people. Let's make people grow. So thank you very much for being part of this podcast. Uh, for all our people listening to us, this podcast will be 2 times per month. It will depend on the guest. It will be in English, French, or Spanish. And we interview people from Mexico, the US, and Canada. Thank you for being part of the podcast. Thank you, Joanna, and see you in the next episode.
All my best, Gabriella.
Thank you.